Welcome to The Debate. Before we dive in, if you are hanging out with us here on our channel, NFL Nexus, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on what you thought about today's topic.
Yeah, let us know your takes in the comments and become a channel member and get exclusive content and perks. Click the join button below.
Absolutely. All right, so let's jump right into this. Imagine you just bought this sprawling custom-built mansion for $230 million.
A very nice mansion, theoretically.
Right, on paper. But almost immediately, the roof starts actively caving in. The foundation is cracked, and honestly, you haven't even been able to sleep in the master bedroom for 4 years.
Sounds like a total money pit.
Exactly. But right next door, you own a modest starter home. It's rapidly appreciating in value, it looks structurally sound, and it seems ready for you to move in right now. So the question is, do you keep pouring your life savings into the crumbling mansion just to prove to everyone you weren't wrong to buy it? Or do you finally cut your losses, grab the keys to the new place, and start rebuilding?
That is the exact dilemma, isn't it? Because walking away from that mansion means admitting you made one of the most catastrophic real estate blunders in history. And in the NFL, front offices are terrified of that kind of admission.
Oh, they hate it. And when you step into the world of professional football, you don't just lose money when a massive asset tanks, you lose time.
Yeah.
You lose locker room buy-in, and you slam shut championship windows that take decades to pry open. So today, we are looking at the Cleveland Browns as they enter their 2026 training camp, facing what has to be the most complex roster dilemma in modern sports.
It really is. It is the absolute definition of organizational quicksand. Like every move they make seems to pull them deeper into the consequences of 2022.
Right. So, the core question we are exploring today, drawn from recent reports on the Browns' organizational strategy, the immense financial fallout of their roster construction, and this fierce, changing defensive culture in Cleveland, is this. Should the Browns officially pivot to their 2025 rookie standout, Shedeur Sanders, as their franchise quarterback, or do they trust the veteran pedigree of Deshaun Watson to lead a restructured roster that's built to win right now?
It's a heavy question.
It is, and I will be arguing that the Browns must fully pivot to Shedeur Sanders. They need to treat the Deshaun Watson contract as a sunk cost and embrace the undeniable, tangible momentum of their young quarterback.
And I'll be arguing that despite, an undeniably rocky history in Cleveland, Watson's proven elite ceiling and veteran experience make him the necessary anchor here. When you have a roster constructed to win immediately on the back of a dominant defense, you simply cannot hand the keys over to a developmental project.
All right, well, let me start by framing exactly why this pivot to Sanders is not just like a fun option for Cleveland, but a structural necessity at this point. We have to look at the reality of the Deshaun Watson acquisition.
Brutal reality.
Yeah. NFL expert Mike Florio recently noted that this is, quote, one of the worst transactions in NFL history, unquote.
Yeah.
And when you look at the raw data, it's really impossible to argue otherwise. The Browns surrendered a staggering ransom, 3 first-round picks, a 2022 fourth, a 2023 third, a 2024 fourth, and they guaranteed him a 5-year, $230 million contract.
Which is just, an unprecedented guarantee.
Completely. And what has been the return on that historic investment? It is fundamentally bankrupt. Watson has played just 19 games in 4 years. He's passed for a mere 3,365 total yards in a Browns uniform. And he missed the entire 2025 season due to injury.
Yeah, no one is denying the return has been sparse.
Even the owner, Jimmy Haslam, publicly called the move a swing and a miss. You cannot build a future on a miss of that magnitude, but you can build it on Shedeur Sanders. Let's look at the mechanics of what Sanders did last year. He didn't start his 2025 rookie season as the QB1, but he ended it as one.
Well, under very specific circumstances.
Right. He stepped in for a concussed Dylan Gabriel in Week 10. But he didn't just tread water. He showed massive week-over-week improvement. We watched him jump from a 25% completion rate in his first limited action to an astonishing 73.9% against a formidable Pittsburgh Steelers team led by Aaron Rodgers.
It was a good game, sure.
It was exponential growth in processing speed and poise. Browns icons like Hanford Dixon and Joe Thomas are publicly demanding that Sanders gets a legitimate chance to start. The future has already arrived in Cleveland. The front office just needs the courage to, officially embrace it.
Okay, but I come at it from a completely different angle because we have to separate the financial trauma of the Watson trade from the on-field reality of the 2026 Cleveland Browns.
How do you separate them? They're completely tied together.
Because I am not going to sit here and defend the return on investment of the 2022 trade. You laid out the numbers, they're brutal. But turning this franchise over to a raw second-year player is a massive miscalculation for a roster that is built to compete for a Super Bowl, right this second. You brought up Joe Thomas.
I did.
Let's look at the exact words Joe Thomas used to describe Shadir Sanders in that very same breath. He called him a development project.
A project that just threw for a 74% completion rate against Pittsburgh.
In one game. But over the aggregate of his 1,400 passing yards last season, Sanders posted a highly concerning ratio of 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions.
Rookie mistakes.
10 interceptions in that little playing time? That is not exponential growth, that is extreme volatility. And volatility is the absolute enemy of a veteran championship-ready roster. We cannot suffer institutional amnesia regarding Deshaun Watson's actual ceiling. This is a quarterback with 3 Pro Bowl selections who threw for over 4,800 yards and 33 touchdowns in 2020.
In 2020. That was 6 years ago.
But that pedigree does not just vanish into thin air. He knows how to read defenses at an elite level.
But does he still have the physical tools to execute those reads? I mean, he missed all of 2025.
The processing speed remains, and that is what matters most. Furthermore, the Browns are forging a ferocious new defensive identity under defensive coordinator Mike Rutenberg, and they're anchored by the addition of Jared Verse, who is, stepping into the massive void left by Myles Garrett.
Huge shoes to fill.
Right. And when you have a defense playing at that elite standard, the single most important trait in your quarterback is the ability to protect the football. The Browns need a veteran game manager who can read complex coverages, manipulate the pocket, sustain drives. They do not need a developmental prospect who puts the defense in terrible field position by throwing double-digit interceptions.
I hear that, but you are assuming Watson is still the exact same player he was 6 years ago. And you're acting like the Browns are completely financially shackled to him. Let's dig into the financial chains you're suggesting the Browns are bound by, because I think the narrative around his contract is actually shifting.
Shifting how? The cap hit is massive.
Well, the financial damage is already done, right? The franchise absolutely cannot let a $46 million per year price tag dictate their on-field personnel decisions in 2026. The money is spent. It's the sunk cost we talked about in the intro. But there is a fascinating mechanical out here that fundamentally changes the debate.
You're talking about the insurance provisions?
Exactly. Mike Florio has reported that the Browns could receive their $88 million in cap credits due to insurance provisions written in the Watson's contract regarding his injuries. That is an enormous financial relief valve.
Okay, but
if the Browns lean into those credits, they suddenly have the financial flexibility to construct a hyper-competitive roster around Sanders' incredibly cheap rookie deal. It completely neutralizes the argument that Watson must play just because he carries a massive cap hit.
wait, stop right there. You have to look at how the NFL actually processes those credits. Because citing Florio's $88 million figure relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of salary cap mechanics. Troy Chapman at Over the Cap heavily disputes that number. And for a very good reason.
Because of how the money was restructured?
Precisely. Let's break down the math for a second so we understand exactly why Florio's number is, frankly, a mirage. Over the last few years, the Browns continually restructured Watson's contract to create short-term cap space. What does that mean mechanically?
They pushed the money out.
Right, they took his base salary, turned it into a signing bonus, and spread the cap hit into future years. Think of it like putting your monthly rent on a high-interest credit card. You get the cash flow today, but the debt is still there, and it's growing. So when this $88 million insurance payout supposedly hits, it doesn't give them $88 million in new spending power.
It just pays down the debt they already created.
Claim is a complete myth. The team is absolutely financially bound to Watson. The cap hit is real. The guaranteed dead money is real. So from an organizational standpoint, they must do everything in their power to rehabilitate their massive investment on the field rather than benching a healthy $230 million asset for a guy who threw 10 picks.
Okay, let's look at the actual cash then. Because even if the usable space is only 9.8 million, your argument still falls into the sunk cost trap. Treating Watson as the unquestioned starting quarterback simply because Troy Chapman says the cap relief is minimal is exactly like that stubborn homeowner refusing to leave the crumbling mansion.
But you can't just ignore the contract.
The asset has yielded 19 games in 4 years. Think about the underlying mechanism of what you are advocating for. Every time you put Watson on the field in 2026, you are operating on the blind hope that the year 2020 will magically recreate itself. The sunk cost is the draft capital and the cash, yes, but the opportunity cost of playing Watson is so much more damaging.
How so?
Because you are losing out on the crucial live-fire development snaps that Shedeur Sanders desperately needs to become a top-tier quarterback. Every snap Watson takes in a system he clearly hasn't thrived in is a snap Sanders isn't using to learn how to read those complex NFL coverages you mentioned earlier. The price paid in 2022 should not dictate the strategic roadmap for 2026.
I understand the concept of opportunity cost, I really do. But have you considered the sheer volatility you are inviting by forcing Sanders onto the field before he's ready? You mentioned Hanford-Dixon's endorsement earlier, but you conveniently left out the most important caveat of his quote. Dixon said, quote, "Hopefully, he is the guy."
Well, sure, every young quarterback is a hope until they prove it on the field.
Hope is not a strategy in the National Football League. You are asking a team with a championship-caliber defense to bank its entire season on hope. Let's dig into the mechanism of why a veteran is vastly safer for a roster like this. Quarterbacking in the modern NFL is primarily about pre-snap recognition and processing speed. It's about getting to the line of scrimmage, identifying the Mike linebacker, recognizing a disguised cover 2 shell, and shifting your offensive line protections before the ball is even snapped.
And you don't think Sanders can do that?
Not at an elite level yet? No. Watson's veteran experience and past elite production, that 4,800-yard benchmark, prove he has that mental Rolodex. He provides a known quantity when he is healthy. He has seen every blitz package, every stunt, every disguised coverage an NFL coordinator can throw at him.
Yeah, but
Sanders is a rookie who threw 10 interceptions in incredibly limited action, specifically because he hasn't developed that processing speed yet. He doesn't have the Rolodex, so he gets fooled, holds the ball a half-second too long, and forces it into a tight window. You do not sacrifice a win-now roster to speed up the processing clock of a second-year player.
see, I can't buy that excuse anymore. You cannot continue to anchor Watson to this 2020 pedigree when 6 years in the NFL is an absolute lifetime. The player who threw for 4,800 yards functionally does not exist on this current Browns roster, physically or statistically.
I disagree.
And regarding Sanders' processing speed, he didn't just play last year. He actively grew into the role of QB1. We saw tangible week-over-week development in how he navigated the pocket, how he found his checkdowns, and how he delivered the football. But I want to challenge you on the psychological aspect of this, because I think the risk goes both ways.
What do you mean by that?
If you force a young quarterback who successfully ended his rookie season as a starter, who took over under extreme duress when Dylan Gabriel went down, back to the bench to watch a physically diminished veteran, don't you risk completely stunting his development? Aren't you actively telling the locker room that merit and growth don't matter? You risk effectively creating two broken quarterbacks on one roster, one broken physically by injuries and one broken psychologically by being demoted.
No, I don't believe you are breaking him at all. The idea that sitting a second-year player ruins his psychology ignores the entire history of successful quarterback development in this league. Look at Patrick Mahomes. Look at Jordan Love. Sitting works. And let's be honest about how Sanders got on the field. He only started because Gabriel suffered a concussion. It was an emergency medical protocol, not a meritocratic ascension where he beat someone out in a training camp battle.
But he kept the job, and he produced against a playoff defense.
He had moments of production accompanied by brutal turnovers. Sitting behind a veteran, learning the nuances of an NFL system, sitting in the film room without the live-fire pressure of trying to win a grueling AFC North division, that is exactly what Joe Thomas meant when he called him a development project. Rushing a project onto the field before he is ready is how you actually break a quarterback's psychology.
How?
Let's look at the mechanics of those 10 interceptions. If he goes out in week 1 of 2026 and throws 3 picks in the first half because he can't read a disguised zone blitz, the stadium turns on him, the local media turns on him. More importantly, the defense turns on him. And once his confidence is shattered, it takes years to rebuild. Keeping him on the bench behind Watson actively protects his development.
I think that completely underestimates the modern NFL ecosystem where young quarterbacks are expected to learn by doing. But let's talk about that defense you just mentioned, turning on him, because I actually think this is the crux of the entire debate. How does the quarterback decision interact with the broader roster, specifically this changing defensive identity?
Oh, it dictates absolutely everything. And this shifts our focus right to the new defensive culture under defensive coordinator Mike Rutenberg. The Browns brought in Jared Verse, and the reports out of camp are incredibly telling about what this unit is going to be.
They sound intense.
Rutenberg is glowing about Verse's leadership. We have reports of Verse yelling, "That ain't the standard," in practice when someone misses a gap assignment. He is setting a fierce, new, accountable, and frankly ruthless standard for this team. Verse has explicitly stated he isn't trying to fill Myles Garrett's shoes. He's trying to be his best self and build his own legacy.
And he looks phenomenal doing it.
Exactly. Now think about the mechanics of complementary football. A defense that plays with that kind of aggressive, edge-of-your-seat, physically taxing intensity requires a veteran offense that won't betray them. If the defense goes out and forces a gritty 3-and-out, what do they expect? They expect a methodical offensive drive that flips the field, controls the clock, and rests their legs on the sideline.
Sure.
They do not expect a young quarterback to misread a safety, force a tight window throw an interception, and put them right back on the field at their own 30-yard line with no rest. Rutenberg's defense desperately needs a steady veteran quarterback to complement that highly aggressive philosophy. Turnovers demoralize elite defenses faster than anything else in football.
Okay, that is a very traditional way to look at complementary football. But let me give you a completely different perspective on how these units interact. I actually flip that logic entirely. An elite, energized defense is not a reason to hide your young quarterback. It is the perfect safety net to launch his career.
A safety net? By putting immense pressure on them to cover up his mistakes?
No, by removing the pressure from his shoulders. Think about the underlying mechanism of why young, highly drafted quarterbacks fail in the NFL. They fail because they're drafted to terrible teams with porous defenses, and they are asked to win high-scoring shootouts every single week. They step on the field knowing they have to score 35 points a game just to have a chance. What does that do? It leads to forced throws, holding onto the ball too long, and developing terrible mechanical habits under pressure.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Because Jared Verse and this Rutenberg defense can fundamentally control the flow of the game, Sanders wouldn't be subjected to that shootout pressure. It provides the ideal low-pressure ecosystem for his continued development. He steps onto the field knowing he only needs to generate maybe 20 or 24 points to win a football game.
Which is a luxury, yeah.
He can take the check down. He can throw it away without feeling like he just lost the game. Furthermore, Watson's constant injury absences, missing all of 2025, playing 19 games in 4 years, fundamentally disrupt the synergy between the offense and defense. A dominant defense wants reliability and consistency. Sanders represents an ascending asset that can build long-term chemistry with this new defensive core, whereas Watson represents the constant looming threat of a medical disruption.
That safety net theory is great on paper, but it only works if the young quarterback is content to actually manage the game. And nothing in Sanders' profile, again, a guy who threw 10 picks in just 1,400 yards, suggests he has a cautious, check-down game manager. He takes risks. Verse and Rutenberg are demanding excellence, not developmental growing pains.
But
yes, Watson's medical history is a massive liability. No one can deny that. The 19 games in 4 years is a horrifying stat. But we have to look at the mechanical advantage when he is on the field. The cognitive load he takes off the coaching staff is immense.
But is he executing the plays?
He is opening up the playbook. With a veteran like Watson, the playbook is fully open. You can run complex, multi-read progressions that keep opposing defenses on their heels. You can trust him to change the play at the line of scrimmage if he sees a blitz zero look. With Sanders, you are inherently limiting your offensive playbook to protect him. You're cutting the field in half. You are relying on screens and quick game.
Not necessarily.
Which, ironically, puts more pressure on Verse and the defense to be absolutely perfect every single week. They cannot afford to slip up and give up a 14-point lead because they know the offense is operating with developmental training wheels.
But those training wheels came off against Pittsburgh. That's what I keep going back to. You don't complete 73.9% of your passes against a defense of that caliber if you're just throwing screens. That game showed the processing speed is arriving faster than you're giving him credit for. He was making full field reads.
It was an impressive performance, I will grant you that. But one game does not make a franchise quarterback. Consistency does. And consistency is built on years of seeing NFL defenses, which is the exact experience Watson possesses and Sanders lacks.
Well, this brings us to the core of the dilemma. As we begin to wrap up this analysis, my position remains that officially pivoting to Shedeur Sanders is the only logical way for the Cleveland Browns to step out of the shadow of a historically disastrous trade. They cannot let the ghost of Deshaun Watson's 2020 season dictate their 2026 reality. They must utilize the incredible safety net that Jared Verse and this new defensive culture provide to build a sustainable, dynamic future rather than stubbornly clinging to a sunk cost.
And I maintain that the reality of the NFL is dictated by veteran ceilings and hard financial truths. The salary cap mechanics, the actual usable space, demand Watson remain the focal point. Furthermore, a defense setting a standard as high and as ruthless as Cleveland's requires a proven entity under center to execute complementary football. You need a quarterback who can manage the cognitive load of an NFL offense, not a turnover-prone project who is still learning how to read a disguised coverage on the job.
I think it is important to acknowledge where our perspectives naturally align here, because the reality for Cleveland is stark. We both clearly agree that the 2022 Deshaun Watson trade has been a severe organizational setback. The draft capital lost, the fully guaranteed money, and the glaring lack of on-field production are simply undeniable facts that the front office has to wrestle with every single day.
Absolutely. No one is calling that trade a success, and we both completely agree that the emergence of leaders like Jared Verse on the defensive side of the ball is going to be the defining factor for this team. That defense is going to be the engine of this franchise in 2026, regardless of who is taking snaps under center. The disagreement simply lies in the mechanics of how you best support that engine.
Right. This debate really illuminates the profound difficulty of NFL roster building. Fans often think it's as simple as playing the guy with the most potential, but front offices don't operate in a vacuum. They must constantly balance staggering, mathematically immovable financial commitments against the raw, volatile, and unproven potential of youth. It is a tightrope walk where one misstep, benching a $230 million asset too early, or playing him too long and ruining a rookie's development window, can set a franchise back half a decade.
It really is fascinating to see how the ripple effects of one massive foundational transaction in 2022 are still dictating the most granular, week-to-week on-field decisions 4 years later. The shadow of that contract covers every single blade of grass in Berea.
There are certainly even more layers regarding the Browns' strategic decisions heading into the 2026 season within the source material, leaving you, the listener, to weigh the evidence, look at the cap mechanics, and decide which path Cleveland should ultimately take. Remember to subscribe to NFL Nexus, like this video, and drop a comment with your verdict.
Yeah, and hit that join button for exclusive perks.
But as we leave you today, I ask you to consider this. When you look at an architectural blueprint, a cracked foundation is obvious. You can point to it, you can measure it, and you know immediately that you shouldn't build on top of it. But when you look at the health of an NFL franchise, the structural damage is often hidden beneath massive contracts, manipulated salary caps, and the blinding allure of past potential. Do you keep trying to build a championship on a foundation that hasn't supported weight in 4 years? Or do you finally trust the new materials you've drafted to hold up the house?